A government engineers a musical movement to enforce national obedience, only for citizens to use those same blueprints to challenge the state's authority decades later. In 1964, the newly independent Zambia faced a precarious geopolitical reality. It was a landlocked nation surrounded by hostile white minority regimes in apartheid South Africa and Rhodesia. Founding father Kenneth Kaunda was a Pan-Africanist who turned Zambia into a sanctuary for regional liberation movements. But at home, he governed a fractured populace that needed a unifying identity to survive. To overwrite tribal and political divisions, Kaunda launched a state-sponsored identity campaign centered on the slogan, "One Zambia, One Nation." Kaunda embedded this slogan into the national psyche through state-backed songs like Tiende Pamodzi, meaning "let's move together with one heart," forcing a collective cultural rhythm on the new country. By using music to construct a unified identity, the state provided its citizens with a sophisticated infrastructure for mass mobilization. This cultural project intensified when the government mandated that 95% of all music played on Zambian radio had to be locally produced. With foreign tracks largely restricted, local artists filled the airwaves with zamrock, a genre that fused Western psychedelic fuzz rock with traditional African percussion. This music soundtracked the optimism of the 1970s, as a booming copper industry fueled the growth of a modernized Lusaka. Kaunda was a musician himself. He understood that by influencing the nation's playlists, he could influence the national consciousness. The 95% local mandate established the pop song as Zambia's primary medium for communicating political values. But the golden era ended abruptly. A devastating economic crash combined with the onset of the AIDS epidemic left the country in a state of societal desperation. The optimism of the early Zamrock years soured as the music scene began to reflect the hardships of the populace. Musicians shifted their focus. They stopped writing about external colonial enemies and began directing their lyrical anger at domestic government failures. This academic study describes the shift as countermemory, a process where citizens use art to preserve their lived experiences against the state's official narrative. The study finds that Zambian political songs evolved into cultural texts that mobilize public sentiment and critique governance. In Zambia, the same infrastructure once used to broadcast state ideology began to carry the sounds of public resistance. Dissident artists had to find a way to mobilize public anger without triggering immediate state censorship or retaliation. Their solution was a strategic use of figurative language and cultural symbolism to mask their political critiques. The song Koswe Mumpoto, or Rat in the Pot, used this evasion technique to reach a massive audience. As shown in this case study, musicians mapped specific animal metaphors to real-world political figures. Labels like Koswe, the rat, allowed the public to identify specific corrupt officials while providing artists with a degree of legal protection. Artists also utilized aggressive repetition and ostinato rhythms, as heard in the track Danuna Reverse. According to this analysis, repetition increases the emotional resonance of the music, turning complex political grievances into viral slogans. The use of irony and humor further masked the underlying disillusionment, making the critique accessible to a broad audience. By layering cultural metaphors over these viral rhythms, Zambian musicians created a system for political rebellion that proved difficult for the state to contain. The top-down mandates of the 1960s have shifted. Today, music operates as a grassroots mechanism for accountability. While Kaunda's political reign ended in the 1990s, the tradition of musical expression he helped formalize remains a fixture of Zambian democracy. Political parties still commission campaign songs, but the public often releases countertracks that subvert the intended message. In this landscape, political music is a living mechanism that ensures the people retain a check against the state.